What's an oryx?
So an oryx, they're a magnificent gazelle, a buck, that lives in the desert. And the fascinating thing is the oryx actually has a heart on its forehead. It's got this exquisite masked face. Some oryx can go their whole lives without drinking water, but they can't go weeks without licking salt. So they frequent salt pans in the desert. They're little patches of salt that seeps up from the earth, and they need that in order to. So salt is naturally hygroscopic; it absorbs moisture, and so they need it to help them stay hydrated. And of course, the salt's got the minerals and trace elements. But then there's another piece of magic where apparently their hair are these microscopic straws, and their hair is hygroscopic. So they actually hydrate hypodermically, which is a phenomenon.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. It's where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. We have Samantha Skyring with us on the show today, a single mother who, after a spiritual experience, founded through sheer determination a salt company. I'm eager to learn about what led her to salt, its health benefits, and how it's been used in the spiritual practices of cultures, religions, and civilizations since the beginning of time. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now let's go talk with Samantha. Samantha, welcome to the show. I'm so thrilled to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Julie. It's so wonderful to be here.
All the way from South Africa. Between South Africa and Sweet Home, Alabama, isn't technology wonderful?
Oh, absolutely. It really is. Right on the very southern tip of Africa.
I know. And we were just talking about it's 9:30 a.m. here in Birmingham. What time is it there?
It is now 5:30 in the evening.
Oh my gosh. Don't you love this? What possessed you to walk 75 miles through the Namib desert for 5 months, girl? What were you doing? What were you thinking? Tell us that story.
Okay, amazing. So I didn't walk for 5 months, but I went. It was between 2 seasons of production. I took a bunch of friends. We had an incredible 4x4 vehicle that was fully kitted out. And actually, 4 friends were with us for 6 weeks, and then they left. There were just 3 of us, my partner, a friend, and myself. And we had time, and we had no money constraints, no time constraints, no responsibility, nothing to get back to. And we call it Planet Nam. It is the least populated country apparently in the whole world. And it's predominantly desert. And then there's what's called the Skeleton Coast, which is the coastline. And it's so remote and so difficult to access because of this massive desert that runs alongside it. And so we had tried to get to this very enigmatic place. We went down dry riverbeds, we got stuck, we got fined by Parks Board. And then we got to the very, very furthest northwest corner. And we'd been in the desert for 3 months, and then we came across this most incredible raging river, and it had this exquisite turquoise color to it, and there were white beaches and palm trees. We were like, we've arrived in paradise.
In the middle of the desert.
So it's the border of Angola and Namibia.
Which
in the middle of the
you hear
desert.
about people, being in the desert for long periods of time, and they see an oasis and they think it's a hallucination. Did you have that thought when you ran into it?
Well, we hadn't really seen water for 3 or 4 months, and then we walked because we literally we drove up the road, and it ends in a sand dune. So we walked the last 3 kilometers, and then suddenly we were in paradise, and we were like, we have to explore more. And now we had a water source, so let's walk to the Skeleton Coast, as you do when you're in the desert with the river with water. And so we walked 75 miles, and it took us 7 days. And it was just spectacular being in a place. So I think the closest town was about 220, 250 miles away. And so it was edgy. There was no one around. but it was just simply magnificent to walk through. And the one time I came around this beautiful cliff face, and I walked around, and there was an oryx standing right there in front of me.
What's an oryx?
So an oryx, I'm going to have to show our lovely audience. Well, I don't have a real picture of an oryx here, I don't think. So it looks like this. It's got these magnificent, like you guys are always 3 feet, 3 to 4 feet horns. And from the side view, when the horns are together, almost looks like a unicorn. They say that maybe the oryx was the inspiration for the unicorn. Um, and they're a magnificent goodness again, how many? 9 feet high gazelle, a buck, that lives in the desert. And the fascinating thing is, once I'd chosen it, and for real, the oryx actually has a heart on its forehead. I mean, which animal has a heart on its forehead? It's got this exquisite masked face. And so I chose it as the logo. And then a couple of years later, I discovered that some oryx can go their whole lives without drinking water, but they can't go weeks without licking salt. So they frequent salt pans in the desert. They're little patches of salt that seeps up from the earth, and they need that in order to. So salt is naturally hygroscopic; it absorbs moisture, and so they need it to help them stay hydrated. And of course, the salt's got the minerals and trace elements. But then there's another piece of magic where apparently their hair are these microscopic straws, and their hair is hygroscopic. So they actually hydrate hypodermically, which is a phenomenon.
What does that mean? They hydrate hypodermically. You know, they if there's is there moisture in the air in the desert?
Exactly that. So at night it's laden with moisture and dew. And so they absorb that through into their bodies, which is
Wow.
incredible.
I was just gonna ask you before you mentioned the oryx, I was just gonna ask you, did you have any spiritual or magical experiences? And it sounds like that was a big one for you when you saw the oryx. Was it how do you tell if it's a girl or a boy? And was it by itself or was it in a herd or
No, so this particular one would have been a bull, and he was alone. And fortunately, I was higher, so there was a section that he could run away and feel safe, because those horns are he could just come and kebab me. So in fact, there was a second experience that I had, and I was in a beautiful place called Sources Flay. It's got one of the highest dunes. Oh my goodness, it must be 100 meters, 900 feet high. Um, and a friend and I were sitting on the dune, and we saw two bulls. One was chasing the other, and then we lost them, and then they ran up in our exact path. And I actually only realized this a few weeks ago. I mean, I've shared the story, but the fact in this desert that is like, thousands and thousands of hectares, hundreds of thousands of hectares, these two oryx ran up into our path to the point that they kind of skidded to a full stop. We actually happened to have an umbrella, so we didn't look human or we didn't look threatening. We just looked this strange thing. And we could smell them. They were just they had the steam out of their nostrils, and then they ran away as friends, which was really sweet. They weren't chasing each other anymore. They were running away from this strange apparition in the middle. So that it's just really shown me how this path of oryx, and when I had the opportunity to brand this beautiful salt from the Kalahari Desert, where these oryx gazelle, these oryx buck are an endemic from. That this really is my journey, like, because that's the first this masked creature, this masked face was the first thing that came to mind when I was thinking of choosing a logo and a brand for the salt.
I
Um,
wanna get into that in depth here in a minute, but when you're telling me this story about the oryx, first of all, when I was reading about this adventure that you had, I thought, was it kind of like a Aboriginal walkabout kind of a thing? It feels like that when I hear the story that the Aboriginal I don't know that the women do it. I know the men do, the males, and they go out into the desert by themselves. And certainly you had a few more luxurious conveniences than, what they go through. But when they do that, they have spiritual experiences that come up. And it sounds like one of those. That was my first thought. My second thought was, it seems to me that the oryx is your spirit animal. And it seems to me that when they saw you guys, you were their spirit animal with the umbrellas and stuff to hide yourself from the sun.
Oh, that's sweet. So to that point that actually when I first journeyed to Namibia, I had full-blown arthritis. I could barely walk. In fact, I couldn't walk up the stair of the 4x4 to sit on the roof. I was in a lot of pain. And when I left, I had a wish that I would walk through the desert with no pain. And this was probably 3.5 or 4 months into the journey. And in fact, I actually walked down to the beach yesterday, like through a little sand dune. And on the way back, it's like, wow, this is hard work. And I was like, geez, I did this for 8 hours a day for 7 days. And by the time I got to when we came back to where the vehicle was supposed to be, actually, my friend had left. Um, and so we got there, and now we in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And my friend had decided to go somewhere, but we knew that there was a lodge another 20 miles upriver. And we just made the logical assumption that he had gone up there. He didn't want to join us initially. And well, in fact, we had taken the wrong road. We actually drove up a dry riverbed. So when we got to the end, we had used up way more than half of our fuel. So he was just very triggered. We were like, okay, well, we'll leave you. We'll go for a walk. And I remember I walked up this it's called Hartman's Valley, and up the other side, the lee of the valley, at full moon with a stick, and I walked up with so much power and no pain. So it was actually a very profound and spiritual moment for me, that I'd healed myself, which was quite phenomenal. Well, through the lifestyle I had.
Yeah, I have goosebumps listening to all of that. So it was kind of like a walkabout.
Yeah, it was. Can I offer you a different word for the goosebumps? Is
Sure.
that they truth bumps
Truth bumps, yeah.
because
Some people
you
call
always
them
get
angel bumps. Yeah.
that's
Well,
sweet.
and I
Yeah.
I get those, Samantha, when I hear something, to your point, that's truth, I'm using air quotes, but also it's a spiritual validation that there was way more going on there than meets the eye. Okay, let's change directions for a minute. Let's explore the history of salt from a spiritual perspective. Certainly, the ancient civilizations, like the Romans and the Greeks, used it. I know indigenous cultures use it. Why? Why salt? Tell us about the energy of salt and why is salt used in so many civilizations, religions, traditions from a spiritual standpoint?
So they call it they reference salt as the sixth element. And I love Khalil Gibran's quote, salt is sacred. Our tears are salty. Our blood is salty. Our sweat is salty. And there is a myth, that we came out of the oceans. And so we came out of this salty medium. And so we need it. We need to keep ourselves balanced because we need to be able to cry. We need to be able to sweat. And so and yeah, I mean there've been wars raged around salt. Salary is derived from the word salt because it was used as a payment method. Um, there was Gandhi's beautiful march, Salt March. Um, and yes, it's in the Bible 47 times, and it is actually in every religion and culture. And it's used as a protection. If I move into a new home, I will sprinkle salt on the edges of the property. I will put it in the corners of the home. And then, of course, there is that superstition, if you sprinkle salt onto the table, you don't mess salt because so salt is white gold. It had the same value as gold thousands of years ago. So you wouldn't waste a crystal or a granule of salt. But there is something where you throw it over, so you kind of throw salt into the devil's eye, keep the devil off your shoulder. So it really has such incredible mythology around it. Um, and a lot of the highways were originally salt paths, because it was so sought after, because we can't function, we can't live without it. It is third most important to the body. We can't live, maybe 3 minutes without oxygen. It depends how much you've been doing some of them are breathing. Um, Without water, 3 weeks, and obviously it all depends on the temperature. In fact, I read a story about one of those Aboriginal walks. And apparently, if you're in the desert and you are dehydrated, you put a little pebble underneath your tongue, and somehow that helps the body. Not quite sure exactly, but that came out of an Aboriginal tradition or something that they do. And yeah, so it is essential to. Oh, and then salt. Apparently, there used to be a Chinese torture whereby they wouldn't give their victims salt for more than 3 weeks, and after 3 weeks, apparently, you can't pick up a cup. You've just and it makes complete sense because we're electric, energetic beings. And electricity needs a medium. It needs so salt. Our bodies are a conductor of energy, and so we need the salt to be balanced in our bodies in order for us to be vibrant.
I
Um,
want to I want to get into that here in a couple of minutes about the physiology of what we need for salt and all of that. But when I was preparing to talk to you today, I looked up. I was led. I call those divine downloads. And I was led to look up what some of the rituals and everything are. And what I found was the Greeks and the Romans used salt as offerings to their gods, asking for protection and purification. Egyptians buried it with their dead. Apparently, you need salt in heaven too, according to the Egyptians, because they found salt jars in the pyramids, in those
Incredible.
chambers, where they had all the riches, to your point that salt was white gold. The Japanese used salt in their traditional ceremonies marking the beginning of the new year, which was interesting. Native American traditions use salt for healing to restore balance to the body and spirit. I thought that was interesting. And I have a friend that lived in Cape Town for a while. She went between Johannesburg and Cape Town. And what you talked about earlier, she had people that helped her. She had a housekeeper at each home, and they would sprinkle salt in the corners. They'd put salt around the bed to protect them at night. And I don't remember her talking about the property, but she said nothing like getting up in the middle of the night and you're bare feet and you're stepping on salt to go to the bathroom, which was hilarious. But she said it is so ingrained in that culture. And, these were people who were, you know, from from Africa. They were African culture. So they and then the other thing that I thought was really interesting too, so we got all the spiritual components, but also the point that salt's used to detox. Take a saltwater bath, saltwater cleanse. If you're injured, soak your part that's hurting in salt. So, not only does it purify, but it removes toxins as well?
And I know people put crystals into salt water and then put it out in the moon, under the moon, as a cleansing as well, because often crystals absorb the energy from around, and if you're needing to cleanse them, then you put it into salt water. So it is, yeah. So it really
It's
is a sacred
fascinating.
mineral.
Whoever thought, now because 'cause you're ensconced in it, but whoever thought salt had all that going on for it. The other thing that I think is interesting that you mentioned too about the salt is how it's around us, but we don't pay any attention to it. If you go to the hospital, you get an IV of saline.
Yeah. Mhm.
Saline is fluid with salt in it.
The saline drip is a massive dose. I think it's like 13 grams of salt. So you suddenly just getting infused. So that it is so fascinating because that's the first thing that a hospital will do, and yet they've been saying salt's bad for you. I mean, then why would you go to hospital and then have be given 13 grams of salt?
Exactly. Which leads me to let's just get into the medicinal and the optimal health aspects of salt. Most people that have high blood pressure, heart disease, a bunch of different things, they're told to limit their salt intake. So tell us what's going on with that, number one. And number two, tell us the different kinds of salt because table salt is very different from the salt you find in the desert. So give us a brief synopsis, a brief education on the different kinds of salt and what they do for the body.
Super. So firstly, there's a beautiful gentleman, James Di Nicolantonio in America. He's a cardiac researcher, and he wrote a book called The Salt Fix. And I love what he says is the wrong white crystal got the bad rap. So, our diets were changing, people were getting sicker and the hypertension but the sugar industry is a very big industry, and they didn't wanna take the rap for, um, the problems that happens because of obesity and overweight, and so it was actually easier to sort of point fingers at salt. Um, so table salt should actually not be called salt. Salt is sodium chloride as the two predominant minerals, and then it has between 65 and 85 micro minerals and trace elements. And they're like friends. The body recognize what is a whole food and doesn't recognize a product that has been stripped and adulterated. So table salt was actually originally produced for industry. So salt goes into textiles and into paint and into plastic. And so it's like a binding agent. And
Table
so
salt you're
they were
talking about. Table salt.
correct. Table
Yeah.
salt, yes. So it should be called sodium chloride with chemicals. So because they produce it in such vast volumes, they obviously didn't want it, and they have to pour it, into these big vats if they're making plastic or something. So they didn't, and salt's intrinsic nature is to absorb moisture, so it is hygroscopic. So, if you were to leave a plate of table salt and a plate of fine Oryx salt or even sea salt, it, in a day or two, it would be wet. The sea salt and the Oryx desert salt would be wet, but the table salt would still be dry because it has one or several chemicals in it that are called free flow or anti-caking agents. So, in order for it to stop absorbing moisture, but that's what salt's value is to the body. It helps us stay hydrated. So, table salt um, should not be actually on a supermarket shelf. It would be like me giving you balsamic wine with your beautiful medium rare steak instead of a beautiful Cabernet. They're both made from grapes, but they're not the same product. So, yes, table salt is made from salt, but it's been demineralized. It's often been heated to vast temperatures. It's sometimes bleached because they want it white for certain industries, and then they add the chemicals. So, it has its origins in salt, but it isn't still salt. Um, so sea salt also has the minerals and trace elements. The shocking situation, though, that we find ourselves is that we haven't taken care of the earth and we haven't taken care of our oceans. And so the pollution in the oceans is now affecting sea salt. So there has been several studies. There was one university study where they tested 39 salts from 20 countries around the world, and 37 of them had microbead plastics in them.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
Um,
Wow.
I know. And
Yeah.
the other thing is that we pee out pretty much everything that we ingest. I'm sure most of you have had the experience. There's only a very small proportion of the population that apparently don't have stinky pee once you've had eaten asparagus. But have you had that experience? You eat
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
asparagus,
I'm like,
you
"Oh,
know,
yeah." And
but
it's
but
fast. Like,
it's
within an
fascinating.
hour. Within an hour of eating
Exactly.
it, I'm going, "Oh, yeah, I just ate asparagus."
Self-labor.
Oh, yeah. But isn't that a genetic
So
thing? Isn't that something to
apparently
do
there's
with yeah.
I should research because I find it really fascinating. And in the biohacking community, there's this product called methyl blue, and it's blue, and so you end up with the turquoise wee as well. And we had asparagus for lunch the one day, and I was quite shocked. I was quite knew what was happening to me. So, so in
You thought,
America,
"Look, I have magical powers that I didn't even know about."
I'd forgotten about this chemical that I'd taken, and that I'd had asparagus for lunch. So if you think 360 million Americans, how many of them do you guesstimate are not on a prescription drug or an antidepressant or an antibiotic or a something? And some of that ends up in the toilets, ends up in the rivers, and ends up in the ocean. And I've grown myself on and my child on homeopathy, and I find it a fascinating medium for healing, and it's so powerful. And homeopathy is the essence of something, and so the cruise liners dump 1 billion tons of sewage into the oceans every single year. So if you're now taking ocean water that we've been affecting, all of this is being dumped into, and the plastic that's breaking down. The ocean water just is not what it used to be. So if they're now pumping up seawater to create sea salt is kind of concentrated seawater. I'm like, thank you, but no, thank you. So I've really
Well, and
become a salt snob.
it used to be too that fish was supposedly one of the healthiest things we can eat, and I've heard many experts recently say, especially salmon, wild caught salmon, they say only eat it once a week because there's so much pollutant even in the wild caught fish. There are so many pollutants in the wild caught fish, and I'm thinking, "Oh my god, how tragic." And and I know there are lots of efforts that are happening, there is a lot that people are trying to do to clean things up, but yeah, interesting point, I never thought about it, and you're right about all the pharmaceuticals that
Mm,
goes into the water, that goes into our rivers and our lakes and our streams and eventually into the oceans.
mhm,
That's a really good
mhm.
point. Okay, so that's
Yeah.
sea salt, which is frightening. Tell us about the Himalayan salt, the Himalayan pink salt, and other kinds. I know there's lots of different salts that seem to come from the Himalayas.
So I'm really fascinated by Himalayan salt, how it came onto the market pre the internet, and it became a global product. I mean, and I really believe it was like almost an evolution of consciousness that like we can't function without salt. We can't think straight if we don't have a quality salt with minerals and trace elements. And table salt kind of came out pre-industrial revolution, where people weren't thinking; they became sort of factory workers um, and almost machines. And so then sort of there was a beautiful naturopath, Jacques Delorange, who was switching people off table salt to sea salt in the early 70s. And then Celtic salt came about, I think, early 80s, early 90s. And it feels like it needed to happen. And the fact that it's such a beautiful pink color, of course, us ladies loved it as soon as we saw it. It was pretty. And so it was actually the color that attracted us. And it was mineral rich, and it comes from an ancient solidified ocean. So it is pure. The pink color is apparently iron oxide. So there are different schools of thought whether that it is entirely healthy for us. But it created an awareness of salt. So it had its place in in really switching us on. And so I have, it was essential for our wellness to switch over from table salt onto minerals, to Himalayan, which is mineral rich salt.
How do they get it?
So it actually isn't from the Himalayas. It's about 200 kilometers. Apparently there was a court case in Germany where one company lost many years ago because it's comes from Pakistan. But Pakistani pink salt doesn't quite have the same exotic ringtone as Himalayan salt. And so in order for them to extract it, and now because there's this global demand, it is dynamited out. So energetically, it has an energetic, explosive sort of quality that it's been put through. And some Himalayan salt has been tested with chemical residue. So definitely not all of it, but the source of it is compromised. In the very beginning, I think they were literally chopping it out. Whereas now, because of the demand, that's not possible. And apparently, there's some fraud in the Himalayan space where the Chinese are dyeing Himalayan salt pink. A friend of mine, actually, she was using Himalayan before we met, and I obviously got her hooked onto Oryx. She had a kilo bag of Himalayan left, and she was like, okay, well, let me bath in it. So she bathed, and when she drained the bath water, she ended up with this big, thick scum of like pink residue on the, around the bath. So don't know what that was about, but it felt like a little bit strange. So I'm going to get into Oryx desert salt.
Yeah, tell us
um,
about that, and then after you tell us about your salt, then I wanna hear about how did you get interested in salt? I wanna hear that whole
okay.
story. Okay.
Um, so in the Kalahari Desert of Southern Africa, which spans Botswana, Namibia, and the northern part of South Africa. So it is a region that is 9 million hectares, which is 1.5 times the size of Texas, to give you a sense of scale. And it's a fascinating region where there's a lot of salt. So, like north of Johannesburg, which is in South Africa, there are veins of gold and there are veins of platinum. So, there are these regions. And in fact, there is salt apparently in every single country around the world except for Belgium. I mean, and Belgium's a little landlocked country, and it's man's made the borders. But
But
salt
they have
is
chocolate. They have chocolate.
they've got chocolate.
Mm.
This is true. um, so salt is accessible and it's available on the planet, which for me is also, in the great miracle of this planet Earth spinning through space that has everything for humans to exist in perfect balance with nature, that salt is available everywhere. It doesn't just come from one corner of the earth. It is in the earth, and that's often where it comes from, and it actually seeps from the earth. In fact, I actually watched a National Geographic documentary once, and apparently all of the salt in the oceans is from rivers washing down salt deposits into the ocean. So in the Kalahari, it's a region where there is a lot of salt, and there's a salt pan, and it was offered to somebody who was in the salt industry in South Africa to see if it was a viable source to use to create salt for their business. They were growing and they needed more volume. So they had to do a lot of testing because the closest town to this salt pan is 175 miles away. And the drive from this town up to the salt pan, there is literally nothing but sand and sky. I mean, it's remote, it's pristine, it's beautiful because it's so sparse. It's really magical. And so they had to test if it was going to be a viable source. And so there was environmentalists and geoscientific people, and they discovered an underground aquifer or a lake, 55 million tons. And they also discovered that there were 3 subterranean streams or rivers that flow and are constantly replenishing this underground aquifer. So, and the rock strata that they flow through is 280 to 300 million years old. And so these rivers flow through this ancient rock strata, emerge into this lake, and then when we pump it up onto the salt pans that have been created, so it is a huge 5,000 hectare salt pan, but they make beds in order to pump it up and so that it can crystallize. And our particular brine or salt water is oversaturated. So it's 110 to 120% depending on the season. And that's what the sea is. It is an oversaturated body of water. And so when we draw it up in summer, in temperatures of 120 degrees Celsius, these salt pans and the salt water crystallizes into these absolutely pure white crystals in only 4 weeks. And what else happens in 4 weeks? There's a full lunar cycle. So whenever I think of being, and I spent a couple of days there last year to go do a mini documentary, and we were gifted in 48 hours a Kalahari thunderstorm of epic proportions. There was lightning dropping all around. There was this wall of water, and it passed within 20 minutes, and then there were double rainbows. And the light in the sky was just sublime and magical and beautiful. And it suddenly, there I was close to the salt pan and realized how the salt absorbs the moisture and the elements and what's happening around it. So, so it crystallizes in one lunar cycle under the stars and with the desert wind. And there's some really incredible new research now around how water has got memory. In fact, Dr. Mysterio Mortor, who's been around for 20 odd years, has done and does testing on water where he just puts a word or an intention onto a glass of water, and then he takes a drop and he crystallizes it, and how the beautiful words form this magical, symmetrical, like a snowflake. It's just exquisite, and so much beauty, and each one of them is unique. Our words have a frequency. Our words have power. In fact, I think one of the first chapters of the Bible, in the beginning, God, how does it go exactly? There was the word, and, God
The word
used the
became
word.
flesh. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and then there's a beautiful woman in New Zealand. Her name is Veda Austin, and she has conversations with water where she has a concept or an idea, or she puts an image next to the water, and then she freezes it. And when she pulls it out, it has a match. And in fact, I did the same thing. I was very intrigued, and I'm going to pull up an image on my phone. So yeah, I was like, wow, this is really fascinating. And so I found a petri dish, and I put some spring water, and I put 1 crystal of Oryx desert salt, and I put it in the freezer. And I thought it should take around 20 minutes, and obviously depending on how cold the freezer is. And but because salt water freezes at a higher temperature, lower temperature than spring water, it took longer. It took about 40 minutes. Anyway, I took it out, and then I put it over a light, and I took a photograph. So I'm not sure about you, but for me, from a distance, that looks like a full, if you were to look at a full moon in the sky, that is fairly close to a full moon, I would say.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
I was like, wow, that's incredible. And so I was super excited. And where's my other one? And so then I decided I put the petri dish on top of a box, a white box, the refill box, that had the Oryx head on it. And it's quite a lot bigger. And my friend and I sat chatting, and then we put it into the freezer. And I'm not sure about you, but can you but if you have a look, you can actually see
You can see the
2
oryx horn.
holes, and then
Holy Moses, girl. Whoa, you guys that are listening, it looks like the oryx horn in there because you put the petri dish on the box with the oryx. Whoa. Wow.
so so water absorbs and is activated by whatever's around it.
Energy. Mhm. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so Oryx Oryx has the energy of the desert and the elements and all the beauty. And
And when you've been talking about that it goes through the whole lunar cycle and it's sitting out under the full moon, I got those goosebumps back, those truth bumps back. And I thought, okay, it's being infused with some serious woo woo energy just from the moon that's going to
yeah.
be beneficial to the body.
Yeah, so literally as you're sprinkling every day, and I'm gonna encourage your listeners. Oryx Desert Salt is available. Well, Julie's going to put a link. And so you can go on, there'll be a link onto Amazon where you'll get a discount for the combo packs. And we also have wholesale on our website where you can buy a minimum of 6 units, a case of the products. There'll be a discount for you there. Um, when you have it in your kitchen, firstly, please do yourselves a favor and sprinkle some Oryx onto your hand and taste it, and then sprinkle whatever else you have in your kitchen and taste that. And believe me, you will taste the difference. There's something. And I believe that the body recognizes the purity, the cleanliness of it, the energetic quality of it, versus something another salt which has been tainted in some way. And so every time you're putting a sprinkle of the salt or putting it into your water, your pasta water, it's literally a little homeopathic dose of this beautiful desert energy and the stars and the moon. So it has this high frequency and vibration
I agree.
that the body it's gifting the body.
Back to if you give us a quick overview of why salt? How'd you get involved with salt in the first place? What's that
Uh,
story?
well, so I've had a very interesting and diverse background. So I started off doing interior refurbishing of aircraft, literally private jets and making them beautiful. Then I started a company called Kayak Africa, and I kayaked and did kayak expedition style excursions onto this uninhabited island in Lake Malawi. And then I did production, and then um, I got involved in a beautiful township, which is sort of, yeah, an undeveloped little, not even little. So this was a township of 300,000 people, many of which lived in little tin shanty towns and shanty shacks. So very disadvantaged and marginalized community. And I was doing community service work there, and I was doing food gardens. And then I had an epiphany, and I had an experience of taking of drumming in schools. So I started a beautiful project called 20,000 Drums, and I actually wanted to have 20,000 children in a stadium all drumming together, because when you drum together, there's a heart coherence and there's a joy that happens. And a lot of the children in South Africa, they've lost their parents through HIV/AIDS and through, yeah, just horrible circumstances. And I've witnessed this beautiful joy that happened when they're drumming. that unfortunately came to an end, and I had my beautiful son, who's now 17, and it was the 2007 financial crash. And so it wasn't funding for happy, emotionally spiritual upliftment projects, which was the 20,000 Drums project. And so I was looking for something and sort of open to. And then I invited a friend or a colleague over for dinner, and we had an interesting um, sort of connection. In fact, we met with my drumming project because he believed that if 20,000 people came into a stadium together drumming, there would be this vibration. Because in fact, all of the drums were stamped with 7 different words: love, joy, truth, trust, respect, freedom, and harmony. So the idea was to have 20,000 people drumming with love and peace and joy and what have you. And his home was filled with crystals, and he had these fancy speakers and sound and frequency, and it was an interesting. He was a very interesting and beautiful human, and he was looking for a food product that had a spiritual quality. And he ended up meeting the daughter of the then salt pan owner, and and then as soon as she mentioned salt, he was like, "Wow, this is it." And in fact, the father of my son, um, it was just the 3 of us for dinner, and he had an astrology reading 10 years prior that told him he was going to meet an African queen and was going to discover a product from Africa. And he was like, "This is it. This is it." So we ended up exporting it to another country for a couple of years, and then we split, and I started the Oryx Desert Salt brand.
Well, you're the
Um,
African queen and you were led, obviously. My gosh.
that's
Last question for you. Why do we incarnate?
why do we incarnate? To become more of ourselves? There's a metaphor that I've been using a lot recently, is that diamonds are only created through immense and incredible pressure of a block of coal. Block of black coal through pressure turns into a diamond. And a diamond, when it is polished, has all these different facets. So it's almost like these, and for me, um, we as souls on this earth are, like God or spirit coming into this mortal body to have an experience, and to discover itself and to have an experience of itself in this, this mortal dual, 3D reality. And so to come back and to experience different aspects of ourselves. I mean, this journey of being on Oryx Desert Salt, the last 14 years, I mean, if you had asked me to do a podcast 5 years ago or 7 years ago, I would have been cringing. This is my vehicle, my journey of self-discovery. I didn't realize that I was a storyteller. I didn't realize, when I'm on a trade show, I mean, I'm a performer. I absolutely love it, but I didn't know that about myself. So, so to come and experience, yeah, different aspects of our beauty, our soul, our brilliance. Yeah, I would think
Yeah.
that's what it is.
Seems to me like you're doing a really good job of it. Expressing your soul, your beauty, your brilliance, where you're being led to not only provide this product to the world, but also to educate us on really what's going on and what's going on with something as simple as salt and how essential it is for us. Because I didn't know a lot of this, which is why I asked all these questions. And I would bet that most of the people that listen to this weren't aware of the different types of salt, what the benefits were, what the negatives were, what was going on, and
And
how
possibly
that's
didn't
going to
even
help
think
us.
about salt in general. It's just
No,
it's
yeah,
there. It's in the
yeah,
kitchen. And often what happens is you go into the supermarket, and whatever possibly been brought up on, even, as table salt. You go in, that logo is familiar, so you look for what's familiar. You don't sit there and go, ooh, what's new in the salt category? That's why I love the fact that there are all of these salts around. Thank you, Himalayan, for creating awareness. And what's fascinating too is that it's the smallest ingredient in any meal, but it makes the biggest difference. It has the highest impact of any ingredient in whatever it is that you're making, whether you have it or you don't have it. And it has that same massive impact on our health.
Well, we have a dear friend who's a chef of a restaurant. I'm gonna be sending him this link for this, and I think all of us that are listening, we all need to send these links to the restaurants we frequent, and the send this link to the restaurants we frequent, especially if we know somebody that's in the food business as a professional, because they need to know this stuff. They wanna make stuff that's gonna be healthy for their patrons so that they keep coming back. Somebody feels bad after they paid a lot of money for a meal, they're gonna think twice about going back to that restaurant. So,
Yeah,
I that
yeah.
was going through my mind too. Yeah. I think you're extraordinary. You're brilliant, you're beautiful, obviously. You are a, thought leader. You are changing the world one grain of salt at a time. And I personally am thrilled to know you, and I'm so grateful that you're doing this work, and I'm so grateful that you're willing to put yourself out there on this adventure, both from a personal and a financial standpoint. I'm an entrepreneur like you. I know what this is all about, and it's a roller coaster ride.
Sure
And
is.
you gotta have golden ovary courage to do it, because guys have brass balls, girls have golden ovaries. And to be able to take the leap and to do that. How can people learn more about you and your work?
On our website, oryxdesertsalt.com, the cell phone mobile number on the inquiry page is my number. So drop me a WhatsApp. The inquiry email will come to me if you have any questions. Our website has got lots of beautiful information. And in fact, please do yourself a favor. On the blog page is the most incredible research on 4 ways of how salt affects our brain and thinking, uh, salt and breastfeeding, salt and menstrual cycles, salt and menopause, salt and pregnancy. Did you? That when we're pregnant, we've got our baby swimming in this beautiful amniotic fluid, which is salty, needs to be a good quality salty for our bubbas. And your blood volume increases by 30%, and your blood is salty, so you need to increase your salt. So if any doctors are telling you that don't eat salt, please thoroughly ignore them and do some research. You really need to in fact, actually, your taste buds, salt taste buds disappear during your pregnancy because you need more salt. So nothing ever, and I mean, we've heard some really strange stories around what people crave, for the minerals and the salt. Um, so yeah, the blog has just got really some incredible research. And please, if any of you have if you're not sleeping, have some salt and honey in the evening. There's a lot of beautiful, very well researched information there for you to dive into if you wish to. And there's just one point I forgot to mention. Our grinders, grinder heads are made from plastic. And usually the mechanism that grinds the salt is made from plastic as well. But our internal grinding mechanism is made from ceramic, which is baked at 800 degrees. And all plastic polycarb grinder heads, when you grind them, they're very cranky. They scratch. And what's happening is that the salts are scratching the teeth of the grinder head into your food. And when you first bite the granules, the crystals of the salt are very fine because there's still lots of teeth. By the end of the bottle, the salt is much coarser because those teeth have been worn away into your food and you've eaten them. So with our grinders, you can buy it once and it can last you for years, literally years. And you just keep refilling it and refilling it and refilling it. So it saves you financially. It ends up costing you a whole lot less just because you're refilling. And last year we saved approximately 817,000 bottles and heads from landfill. So it's not negatively impacting, the planet.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Okay. Terrific. And go to Oryx, Oryx desert salt.com/Julie Ryan for a 10% discount off of all your orders. So that's ORYX salt.com/Julie Ryan. And we'll give you a discount. All righty, everybody. We've given you lots of education here on salt. Education you didn't even know you needed, but now you know. And in the meantime, we're sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama. Mwah! And from
Mwah!
South
And
Africa, from
so much love
Samantha.
from the northern tip of Africa in Cape Town, yes.
We'll
And
see
it's
you next time.
delightful chatting. Thank you. And even for teaching me, for doing your research and giving me some information to go dive into again. So
You bet.
thank you
You
so much.
bet. Okay. Bye, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Take care. Bye.
To enhance your spiritual journey, click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your family and friends.